Hey guys, so I wanted to take a quick minute and do a video about managing cash flow and reserves and how to, when you're growing and scaling a business, how you actually manage the money in the business. So I think that's something that probably doesn't get talked about. I've had a lot of tough lessons in this area and just wanted to talk to you guys about it a little bit. Um, a lot of people, they ask me, well, how much money do I need to have in reserves? And the answer really is that it depends a lot. It depends on the risk of your portfolio. So if you are a strictly buy and hold portfolio, then you need to look at, maybe you have 4 properties that, the furnace in all of them is 10 years old, they have an old roof and things like that. If you're holding a portfolio where, you have existing tenants, and if they were to move out, you're going to have to go back and rehab them, then that's a significant capex risk sitting there right now. So what happens if 1 month you have 3 of those tenants move out, and now all of a sudden you've got to come up with the money to to rehab 3 units? That could be very costly. So I will tell you from my own experience that is something that we underestimated when buying property with existing tenants, is just the risk of, if one of them moves out and you have to turn the unit, because that can get very expensive in a hurry, especially with multifamily properties. So that's one thing you have to think about. And the other thing is with flipping. So, if you're flipping one house at a time, basically you're going to buy the house, you're going to rehab it, sell it, get the money back, use that money to go buy the next deal, etc. It's a little bit easier to kind of keep track of the money and make sure that everything's rolling the way it should. Depending on how you're financing the deal. So we usually use a lender. So the way that works is we might have a 30,000. Let's say the rehab scope is, we estimate it to be $30,000, and we might have a draw account from that lender for $30,000. So what that means is, as long as we stay at that $30,000 budget, we basically have a draw account in which to pull from that we can cover those costs. So that works great until you run into problems. So what happens if you estimated the the rehab scope to be 30, and you find out that now it's going to be 40? So that means that $10,000 just has to come out of your pocket to get that project done and sold. And what if you're like us and you have multiple houses going at once and more than one of them go over budget? You can see where a lot of money, you can have a lot of money in reserves, and it can disappear in a hurry. So it's definitely something that you need to be aware of. We've learned that lesson the hard way, that we've not always had as much as we there've been plenty of times where we thought that we had lots of reserves and quickly found out that what we had was actually not sufficient. So we're in the process of building our reserves up so that we're more conservative going forward, just from learning those lessons. The other thing you got to think about is when you're scaling a business. So we started out flipping, we'll flip one house, and then we started, we got up to where we're doing 2 at a time, and then we're doing 3 at a time. And when you're growing like that, every time you buy a house, you need to have more reserves, in case things go wrong. So your reserve amount needs to grow with it. And, it's difficult to do. And I think one of the mistakes that I've made before is you kind of, I guess, count your chickens before they hatch. So, for example, we had 2 refinances going through on our rental properties. And, my expectation was, well, this is supposed to close on this date. We get that chunk of money, you recycle that in as reserves for these next few deals that we got going. And, well, that refi that we were expecting to get a very large chunk of money from, actually, it didn't fall through, but it took 5 months to complete. So, whereas we think that we're going to get this chunk of money, in January, maybe we don't get it to, May. So things like that can really, you can get yourself in a bind in a hurry if you're not really careful. So definitely something that you need to be very aware of. And holding costs as well. So what happens if you have a house that doesn't sell? So for example, we have a higher end house right now, and the mortgage on that house is $3,400 a month. So that's that's a pretty significant amount of money bleeding out every month when that house does not sell. So you know, I just kind of wanted to get you guys thinking a little bit. It's definitely, I've had some learning curves in this area, and I think, you know, managing the money in a real estate business is incredibly important. And you know, we're going to be a little bit more conservative going forward because of some of the lessons that I've learned. So you know, definitely something that you should be thinking about in your business. And you know, that if you read the books, they talk about the importance of you know, maintaining reserves, but until you actually find yourself in a position where, like, ooh, got a little tight there, you know, it's, you kind of you hear it, but you don't actually, you know, really understand it and take it into consideration until, you know, you find yourself in a spot where, you know, things are going to be a little tight for a bit. So you know, real estate's one of the, as a real estate investor, you can literally be a millionaire on paper and be broke in the bank account, and that's just kind of the way things work. And real estate is really slow, so you definitely need to plan ahead. You know, by the time that you decide you want to sell, so let's say you have some rental properties and you want to sell one so that you can, you know, build your cash back up a little bit. By the time that you decided to sell, so it's going to go on the market, it might take it, I don't know, 3-4 weeks to get under contract, and then you're another 45 days to, you know, actually close the transaction. So by the time you identify that you need to sell something to the time you actually see the money is a long time. So, you know, you got to be thinking months ahead, not just, you know, the next week or two. So that's really all I have. So if you guys have any specific questions or anything like that, please leave a comment below. Thanks.